It's true, taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. And sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. You'll hear from Julie Hall on how the good folks at the GraceFull Community Cafe make this possible each day by providing connections, dignity, and great meals to their friends and guests in a warm, welcoming community space. On this episode of Making Our World Better.
Welcome to the Making Our World Better podcast, where you will find motivation and encouragement through lively conversations with inspirational people who every day are making our world a better place. Now, here's your host, Jay Clark.
Welcome to the podcast. I am Jay Clark, and I'm excited to host a conversation with Julie Hall, Administrative and Community Development Assistant for the GraceFull Foundation, which partners with GraceFull Community Cafe in Littleton, Colorado, to bring delicious meals to the community, whether or not guests can afford their own meal. Food insecurity is a hot button for me, and it's hard to fathom in this land of abundance so many people going hungry. And I learned of the GraceFull Cafe through the awesome Change the Trend network that is working on the issue of homelessness in the Tri-Cities of Englewood, Littleton, and Sheridan. We'll hear about how the GraceFull Cafe is making a difference by not only feeding people who are hungry, but providing connection, dignity, and much more. Julie is passionate about supporting those struggling with food insecurity, advocating for those on the margins, and building strong and healthy relationships. Most importantly, Julie is a wife and mom of 3, and they live in Littleton. Julie, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, how would you describe the GraceFull Foundation and the GraceFull Community Cafe to somebody that doesn't know anything about it?
Yeah, I would just say that GraceFull is a beautiful home in the Littleton community. It's actually, the cafe is built out of a building that used to be a home. And I love that because as we gather in friends from all different kinds of backgrounds, they find it to be a welcoming, safe space. And so we are a cafe like any other. You can come in and you can get coffee. You can grab lunch. You can grab breakfast. The only thing that's different is that if you can't afford your meal, you can get it for free. And that's where our foundation comes in and covers that meal cost for our friends who are either living in poverty. We have elderly who are on a fixed income. We have immigrant families that eat with us regularly. We have the unhoused and just many different people who are struggling to get by. They can stop in and grab a meal. We call them Grace in Action. Grace means gift, and we really love to highlight that. We don't ask for people to donate time or anything. We want them to enjoy a free meal from us when they need it. And we've got really wonderful donors and private groups that support our work and pay back to help people get that free meal. So it's just a beautiful community.
Awesome. So talk to us a little bit about how this all came about and how the organization's formed and maybe some of the history.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been involved with GraceFull since they opened. I lived just down the street from them. But I started to get to know Troy and Heather Greenwood. They're the owners and directors of the foundation and also the cafe. And they just have beautiful, big hearts for people who are struggling, but also just people to live in a healthy community. And so they were kind of living the typical suburban life. They had 2 children in elementary, and they just decided to take a year to step away from all of that and kind of reevaluate what their goals were and that sort of thing. And so they spent a year in Uganda, Africa.
Wow.
And really just experienced beauty of simplicity and creating meals with people and what it looks like to sit across from someone over a meal and build a relationship. And so when they got back, Heather built her business plan and started to learn more about the restaurant industry. She'd always wanted to open a restaurant and has roots in farming country and just sharing meals in community. And so she opened the cafe and they started the foundation at the same time. And really like a couple goals, 1 good meal a day. In many parts of the world, people get 1 good meal. And so if we can offer that to people that need it, and then also just really trying to build beautiful community.
Fantastic. So I love the quote watching the video on your guys' website, one of the awesome videos where it says, it's connection, it's deliciousness, it's different every day, but it's the same every day. So what's a day at the cafe look like?
Well, we open early. We open at 7 and we're there until 2 p.m. And I think one of the things that I enjoy the most is When you come in for your first time, you go directly to the barista counter to order, and they are going to ask your name. And most places where you go to order, that's not important. But at Grace,
Right.
your name and who you are and your story really matters. It matters to us and to our community. And so if we don't know you, we're going to ask your name and begin to get to know your story. And I still remember the story of one elderly woman who was eating with us and said, wow, it is so nice to hear my name. I haven't heard that in a long time. And we take those things for granted when we have healthy communities.
Right.
First of all, I just feel like you feel welcomed into the space as a person and as who you are. And then you're going to order, a delicious drink, breakfast or lunch, whatever it is that you need. But I also love that our prices are reasonable and our portions are reasonable. We create all our food in-house. Our sauces, everything else is made fresh, and we create out of simplicity. So we really try to create beautiful things. We've got a active volunteer program. So we love it when our volunteers come in and make something and they're like, oh, wow, I'm going to go make this at home in my kitchen.
And did I see where when you come in and go to the barista that you pick out your own cup?
Yeah, we have a mug.
That's very cool.
All unique, and that's been one of my favorite things since I first started with them, because I'm pretty invested in the mug that I drink out of.
It's the cheers factor, right? Everybody likes to go where you feel welcome and known. So speaking of the volunteers, how often have you seen it where somebody's come in, had a meal, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is awesome, and have become a volunteer for the organization?
Yeah, it often happens. People get into our space and get really excited about our work, or they'll just hear from a friend that's volunteering and is like, you have to come to Gracefull, you have to get on their volunteer team. And we have lots of people in different seasons of life who either want to build community or they want to give back. So
right.
We have a really wonderful active volunteer community that really supports our work, which we're grateful for.
Well, and how intentional are you with the volunteers in not only providing this awesome safe space, but the experience itself?
Yeah, I think something that I most value and have learned from Heather and Troy is that the person always comes first, not the service. And we're so grateful for the time and the gifts volunteers offer, but our staff and our volunteers, first, we want them to be healthy, whole people. And we want to give back alongside of them. We want to know them and their stories.
Yeah.
I think of one of our volunteers who has been with us for a long time and is now on our board and is now facing cancer. And so that is first, we're going to try to support her through that journey. Most importantly, before we are looking for her to come back and serve us again. But there's this beautiful give and take of the volunteer roles and guest role and and our staff and our board, all that are involved, like being that healthy person in good community is first.
Yeah, you just don't walk in and say, okay, I'm ready to volunteer. I'm sure there's orientation and training and learning the philosophy of the organization and all that first.
Well, we're a little bit immersive in our training, I would say. And so one nice thing is that as a volunteer right now, you can go onto our website, you can sign up for a profile, and you can jump into a shift. But what we'll be intentional about is we'll ask you to come visit us as a guest first. And that's because we want you to experience our environment and understand what we're all about.
Oh, that's very cool.
That role. And then we'll also really be intentional about sharing our mission. Our goal is for people to gather, eat well, and give back. And so we're going to show how does it look for you to wash dishes? How are you contributing to that mission, or food prep, or whatever it is? And so we try to be intentional with building all of that in, while just inviting you to jump into a role and not feel like you have to have all this extra training in the kitchen to be successful, because we want you to just jump in and use your gifts where they are.
What would you say is your favorite part of working with the organization?
My favorite part is being in a space that introduces you to so many beautiful different kinds of people. In our society, I feel like you can easily get segregated, maybe is the right word, into people that are like you, people that make the same kind of money, maybe have the same skin color, maybe go, revolve around the same spaces. And my favorite thing about Gracefull is every time you walk in those doors, you're around someone who's not like you, who has a different story, but you get to connect to those stories. And especially people who are unhoused and live on the streets, they've become guarded. They're self-protected for good reason because they've been marginalized. And so the ability to sit across from the table from them, and because they're being cared for, they open up and share their stories and the wisdom that they have in a way that I would never be exposed to in any other spaces that I know of. And so I am most grateful for that, because it's not just about us and what we have to give. We have so much to learn and to be offered to by these friends who have overcome so much in, whatever the hard parts of their story. They're some of the most resilient people I know. And so I'm grateful to step into that space and to be able to, do that beautiful dance.
That's awesome. Well, not a fair question I'll ask anyways, and you've shared one already, but do you have some favorite stories of guests or experiences that you've had in the cafe?
One of my favorite stories is that when we were first being introduced to Gracefull, we live in Littleton, and there's the Platte River that is a great trail for exercising.
Mm-hmm.
My husband and I like to run, and so we would run down there every day, and there were two young men who were living under the bridge, and I just felt called to connect with them and get to know them. And so we had them up for breakfast one morning and then started to talk to them about Gracefull. And it's been an amazing journey. It's Gracefull's been around 6 years now. And to see them go from that space to now being housed, and both of them are in a much healthier space. And that's not the end story for all of our friends that we with at Gracefull, but you do see that happen at times where they'll come back and come back and come back, and you'll see them in really hard seasons and friends in good seasons. And sometimes you get to see them, I like to say, get to a space of flourishing. And that's what we hope for. We want their best gifts to be used in a healthy way. And so I'm really grateful for those two guys. And anytime I see them, it's good for my heart.
That's awesome. Well, and this is, I think, another huge thing that the organization does is it offers a very shallow entry point for somebody who's in all sorts of different situations. It's kind of like, if you're unhoused, where do I go? Where can I get a good meal? You're going to go to this place that's going to open its arms, no judgments, and just welcome you. I mean, that's a great first step for somebody when they're trying to come back from something or in a tough situation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, when you do this kind of work, you could get lost in all of the ways you want to care for people and help.
Right.
I think we've come back over and over. Our mission is to welcome people in for a meal and safe community. But at the same time, we want to connect them to those resources that are available to them. And so that's what we do. We can't choose when they're ready to connect to a resource, but when they are, we can point them in the right direction. And I think one of the things I love about being in Littleton and connected to Change the Trend and other great organizations is there's a lot of good work happening. And when our friends are ready, I generally know where to point them. And that feels really good.
Well, yeah. And that's talk a little bit about that. Beyond just serving the food and everything else, you guys can almost serve as a hub for other agencies and other services that might be available. And it sounds like that's a big part of your personal role.
Yeah, I feel really passionate about that. And, we have to stay anchored in being like that we're a cafe and we want to be a healthy community space. It's not like we can have organizations in.
Right.
However, when these friends are wanting to connect to a resource, it's so much easier if they can do that in a space that feels safe to them.
Sure.
And so we've been trying to make Tuesdays our what we call resource navigation mornings. And so if there is an organization that wants to connect, they often will try to come those mornings. And we reach out to our guests that we build relationships with, and we say, hey, this group is here. Like, would you like to connect with them today? And I think that has been really successful.
That's awesome.
Just on a more organic level, one of our friends that we're working with right now is ready to go for a GED. And so I knew the organization that offers that and the easy opportunity to connect. And she tried it this week and loves it and wants to go back. And so,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just amazing to be able to, when people are ready for whatever it is, we just have to point them in the right direction.
Talk about how hunger and food insecurity are not just an urban, big city issue. This is in suburbs like Littleton and Englewood, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's some very, very big pockets of significant poverty in Littleton. And I think we all know that in Colorado, housing prices are a big issue.
Yeah.
And affordable housing is not actually really affordable.
Right.
People on the margins, we're all acquainted with how hard things were during COVID and people losing jobs and evictions. So yeah, it can hide a little bit more in the suburbs, but it's definitely there. And I'll just say, just anecdotally with our cafe, in the last couple of years, we were serving 50 to 60 free meals a day. And this summer, we've topped out right up in the mid 80s.
Wow.
We don't see the numbers going down. We see the need going up right now.
Wow.
And so I really think it just takes eyes to see, and to be in those spaces where you can identify the need, because the marginalized can sometimes hide because they're either ashamed or afraid, or they don't feel welcome. And so to be able to be in those spaces to see the need. And I will say also that a lot of our unhoused friends don't feel very safe in the urban area, and they feel safer in a space like Littleton. And somebody said once, like, most of us that don't live in the downtown area live in the suburbs because we feel safer. Yeah. I know that's true for myself. I like to go downtown Denver, but I don't really want to live there. And so why would that not be true for our unhoused friends as well?
Well, I think this is another great lesson that you guys have figured out what you do and what you do really well, and you're staying true to that. But at the same time, with Change the Trend and all these other agencies, you can make connections, which again goes back to your mission, which is fantastic. So how do you manage the financial end of this?
Yeah, well, we're a little bit unique. Some other community cafes are fully nonprofit. And so where we are unique is that Heather wanted to create a for-profit business that gave back in the community, and then a separate entity, the foundation, that would also be contributing.
Interesting.
And so our financials are a little bit different. I guess what I would say about the restaurant side of things is that those margins are very tight.
Oh, God, yes.
So, we pay a full-time chef, we pay a full-time manager, we pay an assistant manager, and we pay our baristas. And COVID years, 2020, 2021 years, that was challenging, but there were a lot of people like ready to go and step up. Like if they were doing well, they were ready to support. I think we are finding this year on the restaurant industry side of things to be much harder with inflation, and margins are even harder. And then, cost of living going up, we have to make sure that our employees are making what they need for a sustainable living. So that's been a challenge. We've also seen our paying guest number go down. And I don't know, if that's related to inflation as well, or, how that all factors.
Right.
But, yeah, so I think on the restaurant side of things, it's just trying to be really creative to bring in that, the paid income. Now, on the foundation side, we are in a very healthy space. And so we're never worried about word getting out and more people coming and saying, I need a free meal, because our foundation always steps in. The cafe is the caterer really of that meal. And we have so many wonderful private donors, and also businesses and
awesome
churches who support our work. And so I feel like our foundation is in a pretty healthy spot right now to be able to continue that work. So it's just kind of a balance with all of it. And we always want to see a really nice mix of paying and non-paying guests.
What excites you most about the future for Gracefull?
I feel really excited about the ongoing community dialogue, and us just being part of that as Littleton and Sheridan and Englewood work together to especially meet the needs around homelessness. Those aren't the only guests that we serve.
Yeah.
There's a high population of them. And so I'm excited that the cities are working together in so many groups to formulate some really robust plans. When we on some of these very challenging problems, sometimes it can be a lot of meetings and more talking, and it doesn't feel like they're moving to action. And I think that our cities are moving to actionable items that will really make a change for our friends. And there's some talk about some more us getting to be part of affordable housing projects in the area, and and then we're always excited about just each new face. To be honest, we talk about how Gracefull could exist for one person, and that would be okay. And so, who's that next new person that is going to connect with us in their time of need, and we're going to be able to serve them? So I feel excited about those things, and just the ongoing work of being in that space and trying to make Littleton ultimately a better place.
Well, I think it's fantastic that everyone's referred to as a friend and a guest. It just sets a great tone. So I always wrap these up. I call them the Fab Four, my last 4 questions. So the first one is, what's something that you will listen to, read, or watch today?
Well, I don't know if I'll get to it today, but my favorite podcast to listen to is This American Life. And I find that I get a lot of great information about our world and times from that. So that's kind of a regular listening tool for me.
Good one. So as somebody who is obviously devoted to this cause, who's a role model for you?
I have different role models for sure in this space, but honestly, my parents come to mind. And growing up, I grew up in a family that had service as a core value, and my parents were always looking around for the needs of others. And I think when you see that over and over, that becomes a core value to you. And
that's awesome.
You can't deny those, how important and strong those roots are.
Outside of Gracefull, is there an organization in the community or somewhere that you admire and that inspires you?
Oh, yeah, there are so many. Littleton is an amazing place. I would just mention one of the groups I enjoy partnering with the most is called Severe Weather Shelter, because they've stepped up to shelter our unhoused friends in the winter as a small organization. And they're they're one of the only ones that does that right now in our area. And so I'm just really grateful that they are there to do that.
Awesome. Last one is, if somebody listening wants to volunteer, donate, learn more, where can they find you?
You can check us out at gracefullcafe.com. That's our website. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, and we have a newsletter. And it's very easy through our website to read about our story and also to find our menu. And then if you go to the Give tab, you can find out how to give back or become a volunteer.
And tell us where the cafe is.
Yeah, we're right in downtown Littleton. So we're just off Main Street on Curtis Street, and pretty easy to find.
Well, Julie, I love the attitude. I love the friends. I love everything about what you're doing. So keep up the great work, and hang on. We'll talk in a sec.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening. This podcast has been brought to you by JC Charity and Event Services. If you're interested in how I might be able to bolster your efforts and help your team achieve its goals, I'd love to have a conversation with you. You can find me at makingourworldbetter.com. To learn how you can support or volunteer for the GraceFull Community Cafe and the Gracefull Foundation, visit GraceFull2Lscafe.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the like button and leave us a review. Until next time, I hope you are inspired to find a way to make our world better.